Have you ever stood in a place where the silence didn't feel empty, but alive? Where the air itself seemed to press down on you, as if it carried memories that refused to die? 10 years ago, my best friend and I learned what it means to trespass on land that doesn't want you there. We thought it was a game. We thought it was a dare. But the truth is, we carried something back with us that night, and I don't think it ever left. It began as a joke. We were both skeptics, mocking ghost shows on TV, laughing at the idea of haunted places. We thought fear was for children, and the people who claimed to see ghosts were desperate for attention. That arrogance was what pulled us into Lake Shawnee's abandoned amusement park. We'd heard the stories of children who had died on the rides, of the cursed land beneath it, of locals who swore the place was alive. But to us, it sounded like a perfect midnight challenge. Stay an hour inside the park, film some footage, and prove it was all nonsense. The night we chose was suffocatingly dark. No moon, no stars, just the hum of our car cooling behind us and the crunch of our footsteps as we crept down the dirt path through the woods. The silence was wrong from the start. No crickets, no owls, just our breath echoing in the stillness. By the time the trees thinned, we were already laughing too loudly, pretending we weren't unsettled. Then the park appeared. The Ferris wheel rose like a skeleton above the tree line, its rusted frame groaning faintly with every push of the wind. The swings sagged on their chains, black against the night sky. Booths and stalls lay broken, their paint long since bled away. Everything looked frozen in mid-scream, like a carnival that had died in the middle of its song. "Looks like a horror movie," my friend muttered. He tried to laugh, but it cracked halfway through. We slid through a gap in the fence. The moment my foot touched the gravel inside, the air shifted. Heavier. Colder. Like the world itself was warning us to turn around. But of course we didn't. At first we explored like idiots, pushing each other toward the rusted rides, joking about the stories we'd read. But there was no ignoring the atmosphere. Every booth we passed seemed to hold a shadow too dark. Every gust of air carried the scent of wet earth and something sour, like stagnant water. I told myself it was all in my head, until we heard it. A creak, sharp and deliberate. We froze. One of the swings was moving. Just one. Its chain screeched softly as it swayed back and forth, as though someone had just pushed off with their feet. The others hung perfectly still. "There's wind," my friend whispered. But the air around us was motionless. Not a single leaf stirred in the trees. We stood rooted for too long, watching it swing on its own. The sound of those chains grinding in the silence pressed into my chest like a hand. My heart was already telling me to run, but my pride glued my feet to the gravel. Finally, I broke the spell. "Come on, let's check the pool." The pool was little more than a pit now, choked with weeds and dark water that reeked of rot. When my flashlight passed over it, the surface rippled. Just slightly at first, then again, like something had moved beneath. I leaned closer, squinting, and that's when I heard it. A child crying. It was faint, echoing, but impossible to mistake. A boy's sobs, broken and breathless, carrying across the water. My friend's face drained of color. "You hear that?" I whispered. He nodded stiffly, his light quivering in his hands. "It's a kid." We both leaned in, the sound growing clearer, closer. My chest tightened. It was too real, too raw. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The silence afterward was worse than the crying. It was as if the night itself was holding its breath. We staggered back, muttering excuses, trying to rationalize what we'd heard. But there was no comfort in the lies. And yet, we kept going. Pride again. We weren't about to admit defeat. The Ferris wheel was next. It towered above us, seats dangling like bones. My flashlight flickered as we circled it. I smacked it with my palm, and the beam steadied, sweeping across the wheel. That was when I saw her. A girl, standing at the swings. She wore a white dress, faintly glowing in the dark. Her hair hung damp and heavy over her face. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She just watched us. "Do you see that?" I hissed. My friend swung his light toward her, and the space was empty. The swings hung still again. I wanted to leave. Right then. But he laughed shakily, insisting I was seeing things, that the crying had messed with my head. We pushed on, circling the wheel, but from that moment on, everything felt wrong. Whispers threaded the air, too soft to catch but sharp enough to slice into my nerves. My flashlight dimmed again, just long enough to glimpse movement in the corners of my vision. A pale figure darting behind a booth, a shadow slipping through the trees, eyes glinting where no one should be. We tried the old ticket booth, its glass shattered, wooden walls sagging. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and rust, and the shelves were littered with ancient stubs and faded wristbands. I brushed dust from one, and it left a dark smear on my fingers. My friend joked weakly, but the booth felt claustrophobic, as if the walls were leaning inward. A faint tap echoed from behind the counter. 3 knocks, deliberate. We bolted before waiting for a fourth. Farther in, we passed what had once been a game stall. Rusted rings still clung to posts, and a few prizes, dolls with missing eyes, stuffed animals blackened by weather, hung like corpses. As I swung my flashlight across them, one of the dolls shifted. Its head lolled, its face turned toward us. My friend swore under his breath. We didn't speak after that. We lasted maybe 15 more minutes before we broke. Together, without a word, we sprinted for the fence, stumbling and clawing our way out of the park. The instant my shoes hit the dirt path of the woods, the air seemed to loosen, the heaviness lifting like fog. We didn't stop running until the car was in sight. We climbed in, slammed the doors, and sat shaking, gasping, laughing like lunatics trying to convince ourselves we'd imagined it all. But it didn't end there. For weeks afterward, I dreamed of her. The girl in the white dress, always standing at the edge of my vision, always watching. Sometimes I'd wake to the sound of chains creaking outside my window, slow and deliberate, as though a swing was moving in the night air. Other times, I'd wake certain someone had been in my room, because the shadows never felt empty anymore. And then came the night that proved it wasn't just dreams. I woke around 3 a.m, heart racing with no reason. The air in my bedroom was colder than it should have been. I sat up, shivering, and that's when I saw them. That's footprints. Muddy, bare footprints pressed into my carpet, leading from the window to the side of my bed. Small, child-sized. They stopped just inches from where I slept. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. I just sat frozen, staring, waiting for something, someone, to step out of the shadows. But nothing came. Eventually, the sun rose, washing the prints into faint stains. I never told anyone, not even my friend. Some truths sit too heavy to speak aloud. I thought that would be the end. But the dreams grew worse. I'd find myself back at the park, running through the midway, booths leaning in like teeth, the Ferris wheel turning even though it was rusted solid. And always, the girl was there, closer each time. First at the swings, then at the pool's edge, then directly behind me, her cold breath stirring the hairs on my neck. I'd wake gasping, sheets damp with sweat, certain that if I turned my head too quickly, I'd see her standing at the foot of my bed. I tried moving apartments, new city, new job, miles away from West Virginia. For a while, it helped. But even in crowded streets, I'd catch glimpses. A white dress in the corner of my eye, a child's laughter cutting through traffic, the faint creak of chains in a place with no swings. Once, on a business trip, I woke in my hotel room to find the curtains swaying, though the window was sealed shut. The next morning, the carpet bore small, muddy prints. Years passed, but the weight of that night never left. Sometimes I wonder if leaving the park was even possible, or if some part of me is still there, circling the Ferris wheel in endless dark. Because even now, when the house is too quiet, when the night presses down like it did in those woods, I hear it again. The creak of a swing moving slowly in the dark. And in those moments, I know she's still there, waiting. And maybe, just maybe, she's not waiting for me to return. She's waiting to come here,